Okay, everybody, this is my spoiler review of Succession Season 4, Episode 9, Church and State, the penultimate episode of the show as a whole. I just want to say thank you to everyone who sat through my review last week with my chipmunk voice and my audio issues. I can tell you right now, I am so paranoid that this is recording okay and that the audio is recording okay. I never want that to happen again, but things happen. But I appreciate everyone who sat through it, and if you didn't, I totally understand. But again, I appreciate all you guys. So again, like this season's been going, we see right away this episode just jumps in where it left off last episode, really the next morning after election night. And it's like we've seen elections in this country happen many times where it's not officially called yet about Mencken, and that Jimenez wants absentee ballots, all of them counted. There's protests for Jimenez going on outside, so this is still a thing where Mencken's obviously probably going to win in this story, but it's not official yet. And you see Roman's just smirking at the protesters on TV. Roman's just at a really bad state emotionally here, still trying to. He always says he's pre-grieved his father, but he clearly hasn't fully processed his father loss, and it's also bringing out all the daddy issues he never resolved. And you see how confident Roman is at the beginning of the episode, preparing his eulogy, walking around his apartment, and how the complete opposite will happen when we actually have the eulogy happen. I mean, he literally says, "I'm actually excited. Does that make me a sick F?" He says to Kendall, which was a really funny line. But Kendall has to face the consequences of his choices he made last episode to stick with Mencken, and that his concerns of how it would affect his daughter. And you see what happens. Rava takes her kids. She doesn't feel safe with them going to this funeral, and Kendall freaks out. And I don't know why, but I couldn't get out of my head. It was probably because of the pea coat he was wearing and how he was like, "I'm gonna go in front of the car." I just thought of Michael Scott here. I don't know if anyone had that connection. And he brings up to Jess that he wants to get custody of the kids now. He wants to set up something next week where they talk about getting a lawyer, but then he sees on his calendar that Jess had booked something of him and Jess meeting. So he's like, well, what the hell is this about? And he flips on Jess when she says to him that she is moving on. And even though she kept repeatedly saying, let's talk about this another day, this isn't the right time to do this, he eventually says at the end, "Nice timing, Jess. Lovely day to tell me." And he's acting so much like Logan here, especially he's walking, putting the shades on, just being a tyrant with no rational thought. Now, Shiv's plan really is working out here, and how brilliant it is to have the Indian numbers come out today. Like, she's constantly encouraging Matsson to bury those Indian numbers now because it's a perfect day to do it. There's so much coverage about the news, bury bad news. And that will pay off. That works. As you see, they mention this at the funeral and that it's not getting a lot of blowback as they might have feared. So that is panning out in the right direction for Shiv and Matsson. Now, Shiv brilliantly also says to Matsson that if Mencken wins, which is most likely, don't just walk away. Have the pitch be that you will make your CEO American. And she's like, and that would be Shiv Roy. And she even says to Matsson, "I will be your puppet." But Matsson brings up where everyone's talking about this gossip that Shiv is pregnant and is concerned about this. And he's also concerned that he knows she doesn't really like Mencken and he doesn't like Shiv. So he's like, can you get him to like you? So I keep replaying in my head, though, Alexander Skarsgård interview saying that Matsson is playing Shiv. So I'm very worried because if you remember, too, the episode ends when he tells Shiv the good news that Mencken said yes to their proposal, that he's like, and I think I can make an American CEO happen. That, I think, is very, very telling and makes me think part of where this is clearly going now, a tragic ending for all three of these siblings, that Shiv is going to get this big win, which this episode is for her, but it's going to crumble in her face because of Matsson at the end of the day, and that Matsson just probably isn't the guy to trust. I also want to mention a great hysterical moment to me was when Shiv tells Rome and Ken she's pregnant, and Rome has this great line, "I thought you were just eating your feelings." I thought that was so funny. And on the other side of that, though, I did think they've always played with Roman doing incest jokes with Shiv. I thought there was just so much incest humor with Roman this episode that it was like overbearing. I don't know. It was weird. I wasn't crazy about it, to be honest. Where it was past even how Roman would do it, where it was actually just getting pure on creepy. Maybe that's the point, but I don't know if Roma would even go that level he did this episode. And yes, he's grieving and blah, 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 but I don't know. I thought it was just, maybe for an audience member, was getting weird. Now, Connor brings a eulogy he prepared because we know Connor really wanted to do this, and Shiv just shuts it down. Connor always gets shut down, and she's like, this might lead to legal action if we have you do this, but at the end of the day, I think not the brightest idea to have Roman do it over a Connor. I think Connor would have been more safe and probably the smarter choice, and that clearly backfired in their face. Now, you'll see Roman says to Greg, if there's any chance of him meeting Mencken, he wants Greg to do him a favor and keep an eye on Ewan, because Ewan already mentioned he wants to speak. So just make sure he doesn't go up there. That will also not pan out and was not protected enough by Roman. And this will lead to the big moment of Ewan going to actually do a speech. Before I get into that, though, I don't know why this didn't really land for me. It felt weird. Was Caroline actually invites Carrie to the front and Sally Ann and brings them all to Marcia to sit together, and she's like, it's all water under the bridge. They all sit together. It's all the woman of Logan, right? And when Marcia put her hand on Carrie, I don't know. I just thought it was a little cheesy, this little moment here. But what did stand out for me was just little moments of smaller characters and actors maybe not as well known, but the actress of Carrie here did a phenomenal job in this one moment she was in. But I don't know if this was such a satisfying payoff for Marcia, Carrie, their whole storylines. I feel like that's the last time we're ever going to see them. Just not that great. And everything, even with Greg and Tom not showing up and Greg taking his spot of front right and Greg always constantly trying to work his way up. And then he gets that moment so people can visually see he's up there in an important position in the funeral. It's still, at the end of the day, what is it really leading to? I don't know, but a lot of it just felt like, all right, come on, let's get on with it. This is an episode that was about an hour and 15 minutes, and unfortunately, I was very bored by it, and I know people are going to kill me for saying that, but I really was just really bored by it. I thought it was boring. I thought there was parts that probably could have been trimmed down, and it was so realistic to the point, like, yeah, it's a funeral, and they're doing it very realistic, but I felt like I was at a funeral, and you could say that's the point, but it was boring. I was bored. It felt more of season 3's pacing to me. There was an episode, I'm pretty sure it was the episode when they picked the president. I always go back to the episode because I really hate that episode, but it might have been the episode before where they're all talking around pillars and just gossiping, and it kind of just keeps moving really slow. It's not as interesting conflict. That kind of felt this here. And it also felt, this is not a popular opinion, but I thought episode 3 was good, but a little overrated, and it gets like really sappy out of nowhere in a show. It's very satire. We're mostly laughing at these characters, but then it's like, oh, Roman, or poor Shiv at this moment. Like, it gets confused in its message of like, are we supposed to sympathize with Logan at all here or not? And I feel like it kind of milks the sadness of him dying a little too much this season, and that shows a lot in this episode. But Ewan talks about the trauma that Logan experienced, believing that he brought the polio that killed their little sister, and that didn't help his aunt and uncle supported this. But he turns it quickly and says, I can't help but say, though, he has wrought the most terrible things. And this is when Roman shrivels up, because now he's already nervous to do this, Roman, but now he's got to follow that. Something bashing his father, where he has to now go praise his father completely. And Roman completely chokes. And we've never seen Roman so broken. And you see how broken he is about losing his father. Sees him in the casket. Like, is he in there? Can we get him out? And like I said, these unresolved daddy issues coming full circle. Just a lot of issues with Roman coming full circle that are just unresolved in his life. But that's what confuses me, is as it plays satire at a lot of points, it plays that sad Succession music when he's crying. What is it telling us then, the music? Are we supposed to feel that? I don't. I don't feel at all for him at this point of everything we've seen him do in the past couple episodes. Now, Kendall goes up to mop up Roman's mess, and that really plays silly too, because he's like, was a brute, but he built, and he acted, vitality, force. He made life happen, livings happen. It's very like repetitive. Kendall's just trying to mop it up here, but he's saying things that will really sell to people who have investment in Waystar, investment in Kendall and Roman. He fixes their image, and Mencken likes a lot what Kendall's saying about keeping what Logan wanted alive and having that in himself. And that's why Mencken says to him that was perfect. But that also confused me, where they had the note of Mencken saying that it was perfect to Kendall, and that why he would quickly betray Kendall in his word to block the deal. So that was not lining up for me. So then when Shiv goes up, she's like, when he let you in, talking about Logan, it was warm. He was hard on women, but he did okay. Okay. But again, this point now, we're 50 minutes into the episode, and really stuff doesn't start actually going at a pace where you're kind of in the penultimate episode of a show and you want things to move along quicker that we're really interested in. That it starts happening here when Hugo informs Ken about Shiv floating a US CEO. But it seems like they're implying that Ebba, he found this out through. But why would Ebba tell Hugo this? How would Hugo find this out from Ebba? That didn't line up for me either. What does Ebba get out of that? They keep doing this with Ebba, and it's strange. Now, a great funny line for me here was with Connor when they go to Logan's mausoleum and they're looking at the crypts, and he was like, I was crazy for cryogenics, but yeah, I wouldn't say no to a top bunk. That was great. But you see, when Ken and Roman are looking at the crypts, Ken's like, I had trouble finishing a scotch with him, so clearly not interested. And Roman says he made me breathe funny. So maybe breaking a little bit into things Roman is in denial about how his father treated him. And Shiv goes to Frank and Carl and was like, how bad was Dad? And they're like, he was a salty dog, but a good egg. And Carl's like, what you saw is what you got. And they look at each other like, right? And I just don't think Shiv's buying it. And Shiv, I think, is just getting sick of everyone being afraid to just be truthful to her and everyone worrying about their position in the company. And then Marsha's like, I was still heartbroken over him. I think he broke all our hearts. But everything with Marsha and Kerry, how they're wrapping their stories up, especially Marsha, just the character as a whole, just felt really flat to me that this is how we're going to wrap it up with her. I just don't understand how this feels like a satisfying payoff for that character. Now, Ken really wants to get ahead of this, wants Hugo to get to the media about the Matsson acquisition, that key members in the family don't have full backing for this. And he says, people who say they love you, F you. And this is the plan to F the deal and me rule the world. So this is rolling off of what Ken was already insinuating to Frank about him just taking over himself and eventually buying Matsson out himself. And Kendall goes and rounds up soldiers, Logan's security man. But this is, again, where I feel like it's inconsistent that Mencken would have cold feet on blocking the deal and backing Kendall. Just strange. But you see everyone's kissing up to Mencken, but Shiv's the one who pulls him over, lures him in, and his ears peak up at the American CEO idea, because he wasn't buying it at first with Shiv and Matsson, but that was the key, and that's why that was a great idea by Shiv. And you see how quickly Shiv flips on her morals and her politics when it comes to business and power. And then even Shiv to Tom, right? Tom shows up, she's like, you would never miss his funeral if he was alive. And of course, Shiv cruelly drinks in front of Tom, knowing she's pregnant, and that would piss Tom off. And Tom brings up, why didn't you tell me? And she's like, because it seems so sad. But then it flips to him being tired. And she's like, just go home and sleep. But him apologizing, saying he wasn't there. And then mentioning he said goodbye when the dad died. It comes off to me a little cheesy now. It's like, all right, get off the Shiv and Tom sad love story so much this season. And again, leaning so much into episode 3's sadness. Like going back to that. It's like, all right. So Shiv gets a big win here. Matsson tells her the deal's done, like I said, and it worries me still that he says, I think I can make you a CEO work, so I don't know if that's actually going to really happen. And Kendall now confronts Roman, is like, you effed it. And I love this scene. He's like, you thought you were dad, you tried to dad it. And he's talking about Mencken, he goes, he had our dick in his hand, we should have his dick in our hand. And he's like, I should have stopped it, so I blame myself, but it's on us, dude. So Kendall knows he screwed up. He should have went with Jimenez. It would have solved his family issue as well with Rava taking the kids. He blew it, and Roman blew it trusting Mencken. But Kendall says we don't want to say bye-bye to Waystar. We have to get real and fight Shiv at the board. The Row Boys versus Shiv. This makes me very excited and hopeful, though. As down I am on this episode, it makes me very excited for the finale. Succession, the one thing that blows me away, it has the best finales. I can't argue against that. No show consistently to me has such good finales as Succession, and I see no reason why I won't change it, because the way they set up the finale makes me very interested and hopeful, because I think that's going to be the big action moment, and we're going to see what a lot of people are predicting, just like a tragic end for all three of them, because now you see it all going sideways for all the siblings. But in tone with this episode, still, I think it was like Roman, his breakdown of the protesters. It was like, okay, come on. Almost too melodramatic, a lot of this episode for me. But I still have a lot of faith in the finale. But for me, honestly, this was my least favorite of the season. I'm giving it 7.5, and this felt like, just tone and pacing-wise, the most like season 3 to me, which I wasn't crazy about. So I was a little disappointed in this, for sure. I still think it was solid, but not memorable. And even on second watch, I watched it again, I was like, man, this is just boring. It's boring. I'm going to get killed for that, but I'm just saying how I feel, right? Watching it, I'm rooting for the show to be good. But I thought, as a penultimate, the final season of this show, disappointing, but I am sure the finale is going to just be incredible. I am calling that. I have faith in the show. The finale will be satisfying. But some character things like Marsha and Carrie just fell flat how they ended that. And I'm just starting to wonder how many times we're going to get teased about Greg moving up or plotting something and nothing really coming of it. and inconsistencies with Mankind's decisions and not lining up for me, and how Hugo's figuring out all this information from Ebba. Why would Ebba do that? So things like that. And again, Roman's moments, the sympathy card they're playing with the Succession music sometimes can be off for me, and when it plays satire mostly, which most of the show is, it kind of gets too cute with it, with getting it more emotional and feeling for that, where I mean they've just spent a couple episodes making us absolutely hate Roman. So let me know, though, what you thought of this episode. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I read every comment. I try to respond to as many as I can. And please subscribe so you don't miss one of my reviews. And please follow me at Steve Varley Show on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok for more of me. And I'll see you next time.